You didn't lose your mind. You were systematically dismantled. And the hardest part is that it started before you even knew something was wrong. When people talk about narcissism, they usually describe the loudest person in the room, the arrogant one, the one who constantly talks about themselves. But that is not what you experienced. You experienced something much quieter and much more dangerous. In the beginning, they were not arrogant. They were attentive. They listened to your fears, your hopes, the things you needed most. But they were not listening to understand you. They were gathering data. They used that data to become exactly what you were looking for, a perfect mirror. And you felt so incredibly seen. But a mirror is just a reflection. It is not real. And eventually, the mask gets heavy. Then came the shift. It did not happen all at once. It never does. A subtle put down disguised as a joke. A broken promise followed by, "You are remembering it wrong." A slow, methodical boundary push to see exactly how much you would tolerate. And because you remembered the person from the beginning, you did not leave. You went into overdrive. You worked exhausting hours to keep the peace. You monitored their moods. You changed how you spoke, how you dressed, how you took up space, all to avoid triggering the coldness. You convinced yourself that if you could just be perfect enough, the person you met would come back. But they could not come back because they never actually existed. Then came the crazy making. In psychology, there is a term called reactive abuse. It happens when someone quietly pokes and prods and gaslights you behind closed doors until your nervous system simply cannot take it anymore. And you finally break. You yell, you cry, you lose control. And in that exact moment, they stay perfectly calm. They look at you, point at your reaction, and say, "See, you are the unstable one. You are too emotional." They wrote the script. They pushed you onto the stage, and then they blamed you for the performance. And you might be sitting here wondering, if it was that bad, why didn't I just leave? Why couldn't I walk away? Please hear this. You did not stay because you are weak. You stayed because your brain was trapped in a biological cycle. It is called a trauma bond. When someone gives you days of cold silence, followed by one day of warm, intense affection, your brain releases dopamine, not because you are broken, because your nervous system learned to survive on the rare moments of warmth, the same way a plant leans toward the only window in the room. It was not weakness. It was your body trying to find light in a place that kept moving the sun. The other thing nobody tells you is what it does to your sense of reality. You stopped trusting your own memory. You started apologizing for things that were not your fault. You began to wonder if you were the difficult one, the demanding one, the sensitive one, the one who could not just let things go. That is not a personality flaw. That is what happens when someone spends months quietly convincing you that your perception cannot be trusted. It is called gaslighting. And it works, not because you are gullible, but because you loved someone and assumed they were doing the same. Healing from this does not start with getting an apology. You will likely never get a real one. Healing starts with something smaller and more important. It starts with believing yourself again. Looking back and saying, my memory was accurate. My feelings were valid. My reaction was a completely normal response to psychological manipulation. That is not a small thing. For a lot of people, it is the first honest thought they have had about the relationship in years. You were not the toxic one. You were not too sensitive. You were not crazy. You were just the one who was willing to keep trying in a relationship where the other person had already decided the rules did not apply to them. And that is not a weakness. That is what love looks like when it is real. They just were not offering the same thing back. You are allowed to grieve that. Not just the person, but the version of yourself that existed before you started shrinking to fit their world. That person is still here. They did not take that part of you. They just buried it for a while. Nobody told you this, but now you know. If this helped you untangle something you could never quite find the words for, subscribe so we can keep healing together. And drop a comment below if you have ever been called crazy for reacting to someone else's quiet manipulation. I read every single one.